Welcome to our community conversation. I'm Beth, this is my friend KiKi, and we'll be talking about race and relationships today. So for me, growing up in Wallingford, which was, at the time, the Klan was very predominant, you'd walk down Center Street and you would see, the sheets. Going to the corner store, they were there. You'd see the black hearses coming down with the Klansmen in. They would go into this graveyard across from where the pizza place is. And I just remember standing there and the feelings that it gave me, some fear, because no one ever really talked about it, because nobody knew who these people were.
And so you didn't know?
I didn't know who they were. They were just these men in these sheets. It wasn't like an open dialogue that we would have in the community. It's not like you would be like, oh, hey, what's up with this or what's up with that. It was just, you saw them, you kept quiet, you didn't talk about what you felt, you didn't talk about how it made you feel. And I know I was pretty sheltered because I grew up and everyone was the same color. Everyone thought the same way. The values, the morals, everything was exactly the same. I didn't have a lot of friends that were black. I never had the chance to communicate with anyone outside of my own race. I remember very distinctly there was in Wallingford at the church near Archie Moore's, and Jesse Jackson had come in, and it had something to do with Martin Luther King Day. And what ended up happening was we had this, I don't want to call it a protest, but it was a march to the town hall. And so we walked in to the church, and the Klan was outside, and they were all lined up, and they had their speaker with their microphone, and they were yelling profanities and all types of things. And I remember walking out and standing there at the top of this, the steps where the church is, and looking out and seeing them. And I remember shaking a little bit because they scared me, because I knew nothing about them, because it wasn't something that we ever talked about.
How old were you when you first experienced the Klan?
I want to say as young as 10. When we were doing that march, it was in my early, mid-20s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, I had grown up with them for quite a while.
When you guys were marching, was it with, what was the march for? Was it against the Klan?
It was to have Martin Luther King recognized.
Okay.
And it was also to stand against the Klan and the dominance that they had held. So when we were standing there, there was this older black woman that was right next to me, and I think she felt me shaking, and she just kind of put her hand on my arm, and she said, I know what you feel, she says, but it's 100 times worse for me. And it was that moment and what she had said to me that made me wonder, why is it that I see you the way I see you? Why do I think about you the way I do?
And at that point, how did you see her?
I saw her the way that, I want to say, the system, whatever it is, they told me what black was. They told me what black meant. I don't know if I would have looked at her and automatically thought, oh, she's black. I might have just looked at her and thought, this is another person. This is another human being. But when I looked at her, I saw that she was black, and black represented something of what they taught me. And it was different than me. My morals were different. I want to say, yes, my morals were better, my values were better than what hers were, because that's what we all grew up with. That's what you were told. And I didn't have the communication outside of my own race to really find out about anyone. So I wanted to know who she was outside of what the system told me or created me to think she was.
Right. How old were you when you had your first black acquaintance or someone who was black that you considered close to you?
Honestly, I would have to say you were probably my first.
Really?
So, yeah. Because I've had acquaintances. There was a guy at Masonic that I had worked with, and we were sitting at the nurse's station, it was night shift, and he had said, we got into a talk about what it is to be white and what it is to be black, and he said, you know, when I look at white people, I automatically think the devil. And he said, I know when you look at me, you automatically think the same thing. He said, you think I'm a thug, you think I'm all these things. He said, but as we sit here and we talk and we communicate, he said, I realize that you're not who they told me you were. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I don't believe that you're who they told me you were. That was probably one of the things that started me to kind of reach out more, but I wouldn't say that I had any really close black friends that I could communicate with in the way that I do with you.
Wow.
Yeah. So when you came to Connecticut, I know it was kind of difficult for you because you kind of, even though it's different, you kind of grew up in the same sense of being surrounded by
all black people.
Oh, yeah. So,
yeah, I grew up in a town where it was, I really didn't have, and my school was all black kids. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't taught about race or racism per se, where in my household, you know, mm-hmm. it was more Bible studies and, you know, love your brother and that stuff. But like in elementary school, mm-hmm. I watched a movie called Uncle Tom's Cabin, and it was about a slave, Uncle Tom. And that movie really made me not like white people. Mm-hmm. Because, and I was in the 3rd grade, so I had to be like 7 or 8 years old, and I didn't have any guidance with that. Like I would ask my father, and he wouldn't elaborate. He wouldn't really explain to me what slavery was, right, and the racism part of it. It triggered me to go into studies about black studies. Mm-hmm. I would ask my grandmother questions because she grew up in the South, and I learned from the movie that slavery happened in the South. She told me how her mother needed like an appendectomy, a simple surgery that, you know, that she would have lived. Mm-hmm. But because they didn't operate on black people at that time, my great-grandmother had passed away because of it. Mm-hmm. And that just solidified in my mind not liking white people. Right. And so as a little 3rd grader, I'm like, all white people are bad. You know, all white people don't like black people. Mm. But then as I grew older, I still lived in the town where it was all black. Yeah. I didn't really have contact with white people until I moved to Connecticut. And I was afraid to move to Connecticut and I wasn't aware that the Ku Klux Klan was in Wallingford. You know, but I was afraid of being surrounded by a bunch of white people. I thought skinheads and the Klan mm-hmm. was going to come after me because I wear my hair natural, mm-hmm. and I identify with my blackness so much. Right. It must have been fearful, leaving, I don't want to say a protected area, but an area that was just like you, to kind of come out of that and come into something that was so unfamiliar, so new and so different, and not like me, you know, when they introduced us or started to mix mm-hmm. into the high schools. I don't know why it has to be like such a big deal, but it's like when black kids had come in, it was like this, oh my God, this is so new because it's not like me, and because they told me and showed me all this stuff, I don't like it. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So how did you kind of adjust? I mean, was it by talking to people? Was it something? Well, the reason I moved to Connecticut was to get, where I lived in New York, even though I was surrounded by black people, it wasn't safe. Mm-hmm. It is better for me to be in this new environment mm-hmm. for, you know, raising my children, right, than to be there mm-hmm. in that environment and having my children grow up being like a product of their environment, which mm-hmm. wasn't good. And I was a young mother. To deal with my fears, I had to be around white people more. When I first started, my first job in a nursing home is when I started to open up. I thought, okay, all the white people here are racist. That's it. They're all racist. But they were friendly. They would talk to me and try to get me to open up. They didn't know that in my mind I didn't like them because they were white. I thought, right, like the guy said to you, they're mm-hmm. white devils. That's exactly what I thought. Mm-hmm. But then the more I talked to them, the more I've realized that, you know, these are individual people and they're not their forefathers, you know.
Right.
It helped me to open up.
Well,
But, you know, I didn't have a white friend until you.
really? Oh, see, that's kind of awesome. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, because I felt like you were the smartest person around, and we started having conversations that weren't about race.
Right.
But it just let me know that you felt empathy for humanity that other people just seem to not care about.
And I think that's the big thing, especially today, is that I have to get to know you for you.
Right.
I can very easily become something that I hate. I can hate oppression and yet become someone who oppresses if I allow myself to become absorbed in this created race thing, where because you're white or brown or black, you have this value, this moral, you're this, and you hate this one and you hate that one. If I allow myself to get so caught up in what they created us to be, I can become something other than empathetic. I can become something other than someone who wants to know you, the person, not the color, but the person. And at the end of it, even if we don't always agree, we can still walk away relating to some issues. As far as like, you had your ideas of the Klan, and I...
Well, I thought everybody in Connecticut
was the Klan.
a part of the Klan, and, or what do they call them, skinheads?
Skinheads, yeah, we had the skinheads here too.
I thought for sure everybody in Connecticut was like, all the white people were a part of that, you know, organization or whatever. So I was kind of biased, and I understand what you're saying, how you can hate something so much that you begin to emulate it.
Yeah.
And you think just because you're not white that you can't be a racist.
Right.
But then what I feel like a lot of black people do is they do what they feel is being done to them, but they're ignorant to that fact.
Yeah, I think we've created this environment where only one color can become this and another color is free from it. Where I don't think it's about color, I think it's about what's in here. Self-preservation can be an awful thing because I could want to preserve myself above your life. Do you know what I'm saying? And I can allow anything to happen to you as long as my space and my thing is good. And I think that exists beyond color. I think it's something that comes from the heart. I think it comes from human nature. I think we all have the ability to become a racist.
I have this thing where I didn't want my children to have children with people outside of their race.
Right.
And I'm told constantly that that makes me a racist. And I don't think it makes me a racist because I don't hate white people. I don't hate people of other cultures or races or people from other places. I don't hate that. But then in my life, I'm forced to deal with those things. My brother has biracial children. My granddaughter is biracial. I love my granddaughters. I love my nieces. I don't hate them.
Right.
And I still think that, you know, people should still procreate within their race. But I don't hate the product of it.
Right, I understand. I mean, because the love surpasses color or biracial. It surpasses
it does.
all that.
And when I look at my nieces, I don't see biracial children. I see two beautiful little girls whom I love dearly.
Right.
You know, I didn't shun my daughter. I didn't disown her when she had her children, her biracial children. So I think it's just something that it's a part of me and what I went through and being like Black Power. You know what I'm saying?
Part of your experiences.
Yeah.
I think, you know, like, and I have my own. I mean, a part of what I went through, like, there's a lot of times where you're afraid to speak. You're afraid to say certain things within your own community because you don't want to get backlash, because you don't want to be called, I don't want to say, like, you know, maybe like a traitor, or you're selling out like your own white race, so to speak. But if we can talk about truth, if we can talk about why you feel the way you feel, why I feel the way I feel, we can finally get past some of these things and start getting to some unity, because at the end of the day, you can become the same thing that I can become. We can become what our forefathers were, no matter the color.
And I don't pass these views I have onto my children. Like my son, he's going to be 15, and he has a girlfriend, which I totally disagree with. And I was so angry with her mom for okaying the relationship. We could have explained friendship to them and let them be that, but they wanted this label. And so she's Puerto Rican, and he's black. And then the other day, he came home, and he's telling me how his girlfriend had told him her parents don't necessarily like him because he's black. So then it's like I got a little bit of taste of my own medicine, you know, because I didn't like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, do you like black girls? And in his mind, he thinks that, no, you know, the black girls at my school, they're ghetto. They like hood. They act like hood people, and some of the Spanish girls act like, you know, ghetto, and some of the white girls too. Yeah. And he was like, why can't they just sip their tea with their pinkies up? And so it's clear that he doesn't share my bias that I've grown with, that I'm letting go of.
Well, see, but that's important because you recognize things. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you recognize, okay, this is something that I hold, but just because I hold it, it doesn't mean it's something I'm going to pass on to my
I don't want to pass it on to them because a lot of it was unguided, you know, like
well, yeah,
where I'm studying, you know, black studies. Just because I'm studying about my black history doesn't mean that I have to hate other people. Right. Because of the atrocities that happened to my people. You know what I mean? I can't pass that on to, you know, those were my ancestors that went through that, and I didn't go through that. So I have to, I don't want to say take myself out of the equation, you know what I mean? But I have to, what is it called? Cognitive dissonance? I have to remove myself some type of way and not personalize it and just, you know, like have an open mind about it. But I don't want them to carry those biases because they're the future. And if they can learn to work together with all people, all humans, then they won't carry biases to limit them on who they will and will not, you know, associate themselves with, or who they can and cannot work with because of religion or whatever. Yeah, because, I mean, if you go back far enough, you'll come to find that this race was all created. Yes. You know, and they put us into these groups, and, you know, if you have this kind of hair and this kind of structure, you're this. They associated that with morals and values, and at the end of the day, it summed up who you were, who I am, who this one is. And I think if we can get past that creation and just see that you have every right to live as anyone else does. No matter what your skin color, you have the right to be respected, to be heard. You have the right to talk about your history. You have the right to talk about slavery. Because no matter what, I don't understand those things. Do you know what I'm saying? And I wouldn't even try to say that I do. But see, the thing is with that, I don't even understand what it is to be a slave. You know what I mean? It's, I can't identify with the emotions that they probably would have went through because I was not that. But the goal with me for my studies of my past was to go beyond slavery, because before slavery there had to be something. Yes. You know what I mean? And there's so much more richness in our history that extends beyond slavery, that if you get stuck there, you can get stuck in that mentality. And then you can become this thing, something other than, you can become what you hate. Do you know what I mean? Yes, I do. Because there were these inventions that came from the black community. There was all these positive things that I think in some ways are being forgotten. And I think they need to be recognized more and talked about more, the contributions that were made. Right, and not shunned away. And not shunned. I think a lot of times with black people, it's like, when we try to look into our past and we're say, don't, you know, leave it alone, it's in the past, and, you know, it's like we have a right. Of course, yeah. And it's not our fault that a lot of the immediate past history is tainted. Right. You know what I mean? But the same way you can have reverence for your ancestors who are like kings and queens and stuff. Right. We can have that same reverence. But I think people need to get beyond slavery. And I also want to say this. Black people have concepts about other black people who we say who are hood or ghetto.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't want to be around those people either.
Right.
But our thing is that the media only portrays the bad side of black folks. They don't show you the successful people, you know, the people who do good for their community. They just show one side of it. And that's the side that gets that's the side that gets acknowledged by all other people.
And unfortunately, the media has created a lot of problems, and a lot of the reasons why we are where we are is because of them. I mean, if they're going to constantly show someone in the black community as being this, everyone's going to think this.
Right.
Do you know what I'm
about
saying? About all. And if they constantly show people in the white community as being this, everyone's going to think this.
Right.
And not realize that I'm not that white person and you're not that black person.
Right.
And the only way for me to know that is to actually sit down and have a conversation with you. And yes, talk about slavery. Talk about maybe the impacts that it has had generationally.
Without getting angry.
Without getting angry.
And without making it personal to where now we're arguing
and
have bad blood because I didn't like something you said. Instead of trying to understand you and to understand where you come from. Because I did see a program where a guy called into a radio station and was telling the black lady, you know, I was a racist and I was prejudiced, and they became friends.
Yeah.
But had she listened to him and took everything he said personally, you know what I mean, and got defensive about it, then that friendship would have never happened.
And she could have lost. They both could have lost. I mean,
because it could have reinforced his prejudices.
Exactly.
If she had not responded with an open mind and an open heart.
Out of all the blacks that I've known, one of the ones that I feel the most comfortable saying, so what does it feel like? Do you know what I mean? And from being able to come to you and talk to you, because I grew up a certain way, and I don't know.
Right.
And I want to know, because I don't know what it feels like economically. I don't know certain things. And I can talk to you, even if I don't agree with every single point. And it's maybe because in some ways I'm ignorant and I don't understand, but the fact that I want to and the fact that you want to help me, and then I can say to you, but I know you have this idea of white people being this way, but I'm not that person.
Right.
If we just fought and argued and labeled one another, we would have missed this whole moment.
You know, the thing for me was just, and coming to Connecticut, is just really finding out that all white people aren't rich.
It's true.
You know, they're not all smart.
That is true. Oh my God.
They're not all, you know, buttholes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know.
They're not all prejudiced. You know, they all didn't grow up with a silver spoon in their mouth. So they're really pretty much a lot of ways just like me. We reflect. I think the white community reflects some of the black, and I think some of the black reflects some of the white. You have your rich, you have your poor. Poor white kids that grow up, and sometimes they miss a meal because the money's just not there in the same way you have with the black kids. And I think if we can focus on those things that, okay, this happened, you know, and recognizing and acknowledging this is very important to the black community, and there's no, I'm for that. So let's go from here to where we are now, and maybe we can actually do something about hunger. Maybe we can do something about poverty. And human rights.
And human rights, and these schools that these kids go to, and there's no heat.
I saw that.
You see that? And they're sitting there with their jackets on. I mean, all this arguing and division, in my mind, has brought us to this place where everything is just worse. Because if they can keep me and you divided, all of this poverty and hunger just keeps going on and on and on.
And the thing is that when these conversations happen, it's like instead of so much focusing on the problem, we need to come up with issues that's just going to benefit everybody.
Yeah, solutions.
Solutions.
I hear so much labeling and arguing, and I see so much hatred, but no one's talking about solutions.
They miss the point.
Yeah.
And then it's like a lot of times when you go on these posts, and it's like the message is just so profound, but the stupidity that comes within the comments It's like you have no time, and it's like, how do you address all of this ignorance?
And you can't. There's a lot of ignorance.
Because as soon as you say something, somebody comes back with something even more ignorant. And it's
Well,
like,
yes.
it's not even about that.
And this is the thing, even when...
Let's take it back to the facts.
Right. I think people get caught up with the emotional part of things. Right now there's this hyped up emotionalism that's going on, and people get swept up, and if they would stop for a minute, like maybe me and you have, and just stopped and listened and talked, we could make some advancements instead of keep going around the same wheel where divide me from the blacks and the browns, divide the blacks and the browns from the whites. And at the end of the day, the system's still the system.
Right.
We're fighting and we're arguing.
But they benefit off this division.
And they benefit off of it. I mean, they benefit, poverty of all this stuff. If we can kind of get past, as a whole, this and start working on solutions that actually affect the system that created all this, we might get somewhere. But until we can get from here to there, at the end of the day, even if we lose, the system still wins.
People don't realize how big of a voice they have.
Right.
And with the divide and conquer, they don't realize how much stronger we are when we come together.
I agree.
You know,
totally.
like King was marching, and there was a lot of people just working together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's important, because you're working together for you, for me, for the kids.
For the children.
And for the children. And you're working together against a system that really, in my opinion, could care less if you stay poor or if I stay poor.
And now it's to the point where everybody is so divided on these race issues that the children are being so neglected. It's like we have this generation of kids to grow up, like if they inherit the planet as ignorant as some of them are, then we're just going to be like...
I was misguided. You were misguided. And now what's happening is we've got a whole generation of kids coming that are also misguided because we're fighting so much.
And then they're being taught hatred.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like it's the same way I grew up with my biases that were self-taught. These biases weren't taught to me in my home.
Yeah,
you know,
it
was self-taught.
It's the same on my
you know,
end,
because growing up in a neighborhood where it's predominantly black, it wasn't a good neighborhood to grow up in to begin with. That was the reason for the move.
Right.
But if these ignorant people are raising their children with ignorance, then it just perpetuates the problem.
Right. And we're missing the solution.
And the solution is to work together.
That's it.
To have these hard conversations. Right. It's like, I like to have hard conversations because once you get past that uneasiness, it's like a bond created.
Well, that's what happened, I think, with us, too.
But I don't think we ever had, like, a hard conversation.
No.
Because we don't judge each other.
Yeah, I guess so in some ways.
You get to speak freely, and I'm like, oh, Beth, why do you think that? Yeah. If I ask you, like, why do you think that? You know what I mean? And then you explain yourself to me. If people just have to have an open mind.
Yes,
when it comes to these things, and not be so closed.
And we have to understand we all come from somewhere. We've all been taught something. We've all been unguided. We've all been taught about what you mean, what I mean, what the color means, all of that. We've all been taught these things. And we've been doing this for centuries, and we've gotten nowhere. We're no better today than we were centuries ago.
No, I think, you know what I think needs to happen? I think they need to put someone in the presidency who has no political ties. They need to get rid of everyone in Congress and just hire and put regular common folk like us.
Talked before we even decided to even really do this. I had put it on Facebook, and I did get some backlash. And some of the backlash did come from the white community, and it did surprise me because some of the things that were said were very negative, like, who do you think you are, and you have no right to speak for the white community, and that was never my intention. And I thought, you know, you guys, it's starting already, and I haven't even said anything. And that made me afraid. It made me afraid to come here. It made me afraid to talk. It made me afraid to open up. But if we keep being afraid of labels and of these things, then we're not going to get anywhere.
And I was angry that you felt that way because our intentions were pure and honest, and it wasn't going to be like we're going to come on this show and start arguing with each other, you know, like a reality TV session. It was like to have an honest conversation, to be positive with each other. And my fear was, it was like, who am I to speak for the black community? You know what I'm saying?
Right, exactly.
So it's like, but I'm just speaking on myself and you speaking on yourself.
And that's it.
And that's it.